Good morning, beloveds. My name is Tuli Patel. My pronouns are she, hers. And along with our ministers, Reverend Emily Boggess and Reverend Dr. Robin Tanner, we are a leadership team at Beacon Unitarian Universalist Congregation in Summit on the lands of the Lenni Lenape and the Mansi Lenape. We bring you greetings this Sunday morning and hope you'll take a moment to introduce yourselves in the chat. Tell us where you're tuning in from, and also spread the good word of Beacon. Let your friends and family know, maybe through Facebook, YouTube, or even our website, www.summitbeacon.org. It's been a confusing week and a hard week with some difficult news for many of us, with family members falling ill with Omicron, confusing news from schools for some of us who have kids in the school system. Every day seems to be a different affair. And so we hope that you are staying grounded with the practices that have kept you going over the last 2 years, including coming to our Sunday morning worship services, as well as our small groups for adults, children, and youth. So as we return to our groundedness, I invite you to take a deep breath. Welcome yourself to the sacred hour. Welcome each other to the sacred hour. Whoever you are, however you are, you belong here. We are better because you are here with us. Let us worship together.
We light this chalice to welcome a new spark, a new flame, a new intention for the new year to come, burning bright and strong within our hearts and minds, and guiding us and encouraging us to build a new world, beloved, to carry this flame for racial justice, for reproductive rights justice, immigrant rights, and climate justice, and to carry this flame to illuminate the way for all sentient beings to find a place of healing.
In the town of Hapville, which wasn't a very big town, Mr. Peabody, the local history teacher, congratulated his little league team for a great game. They hadn't won, but no one really cared because they'd had such a good time playing. On his walk home down the main street, which wasn't a very big street, Mr. Peabody would wave to everyone he knew, and everyone would wave back. He would stop at the market and admire the apples Mr. Funkadeli had on display. Then he would pick out the shiniest apple, drop it into his bag, and continue his way home. Across the street, Tommy Tittlebottom watched as Mr. Peabody walked away with the apple. "That's not right. Mr. Peabody didn't pay anyone for that apple." Tommy hopped on his skateboard and rushed away to tell his friends. The following Saturday, Mr. Peabody's team played another game, as usual, and they lost, but they had so much fun that no one really cared. Afterwards, Mr. Peabody stopped by Mr. Funkadeli's market, picked up the shiniest apple, plopped it in his bag, and continued his way home. Across the street, Tommy Tittlebottom and all his friends watched Mr. Peabody, and they ran off to tell their friends, who told their neighbors, who told their parents, who told their neighbors, and told all their friends in Hapville, which wasn't a very big town, that Mr. Peabody didn't pay for the apple. Saturday morning came again, but it found Mr. Peabody standing all alone on the baseball field, wondering where everybody was. Then he saw Billy Little, who wasn't a very big boy, walking toward the field with a sad look on his face. "I'm glad you're here, Billy, but, where's the rest of the team?" asked Mr. Peabody. Billy remained silent, sadly staring down at his shoes. "What's wrong, Billy?" he asked again. "Everyone thinks you're a thief," Billy said. Mr. Peabody scratched his head and looked confused. "Who says I'm a thief?" "Tommy Tittlebottom and his friends said they saw you take apples from Mr. Funkadeli's market, and you didn't pay for them." "Well, let's go talk to Mr. Funkadeli about this, shall we?" said Mr. Peabody. Billy and Mr. Peabody walked down the main street, which wasn't a very big street, and Mr. Peabody waved at all the people he knew, but now some of them didn't wave back, and some even pretended they didn't see him. Out popped Mr. Funkadelic, who said, "Hey, Mr. Peabody, you're here kind of early." "We didn't have a game today, and I was wondering if I could pick up my apple early." "Sure, why not? You pay for them every Saturday morning when you pick up your milk. You can take your apple any time you'd like." Mr. Peabody took his apple and offered it to Billy. "I would like to take that apple, Mr. Peabody, but I need to go find Tommy Tittlebone and his friends and explain everything." "When you find him, Billy, please tell him to come visit me at my house." Billy found Tommy and his friends and told them what happened with the apples. So off Tommy ran to Mr. Peabody's house. When Mr. Peabody came to the door, he and Tommy silently stared at each other for a minute. "I didn't understand. I shouldn't have said what I said, but it looked like you hadn't paid for those apples." "It doesn't matter what it looked like, Tommy. What matters is the truth," said Mr. Peabody. Tommy looked down at his shoes. "I'm so sorry. What can I do to make things better now?" "It's a windy day, isn't it?" Mr. Peabody asked, stepping onto his porch. Tommy nodded. "Here's a pair of scissors and a pillow. I want you to cut the pillow open and shake the feathers out." Tommy looked confused, but he did what Mr. Peabody asked. It was a small price to pay to gain his forgiveness. The wind carried the thousands of feathers far and wide. Tommy looked relieved. "Is that all I have to do to make things better?" "Almost," said Mr. Peabody. "Now, you must go and pick up all the feathers." Tommy frowned. "I don't think it's possible for me to pick up all the feathers." "You're right. It would be just as impossible to undo the damage you've done by spreading the rumor that I'm a thief. Every feather represents a person in Hapville," said Mr. Peabody. Tommy finally understood what his words had done. "I guess I have a lot of work to do, don't I?" "Indeed you do, Tommy. Next time, don't be so quick to judge a person, and remember the power of your words." Then Mr. Peabody handed Tommy a shiny red apple and went inside his home. Here ends our story for all ages.
Please join me as we move into our weekly candle lighting ritual, a time when we honor the fullness that is life and extend the care of our community. Begin by putting your hand on your heart. Feel the beating of your heart and feel our collective presence with you. If there is a struggle in your heart, we invite you to put a heart emoji in the chat for your struggle. Lift up in the chat the names of a person or a place that is struggling so that we can hold them together. Today, we light our memorial candle for Elizabeth O'Byrne, beloved Beacon member, who died on January 2nd after suffering from a fungal infection. We are holding her husband, Brian, her children, and their spouses, and her grandchildren in our thoughts and prayers. We light a candle for Beacon member Rosemary Levine's son, Peter, who was suffering from ALS. We light a candle for Beacon member Joan Borneman, whose life is waning. We will journey with her to the end. We light a candle for the suffering and major disruption of Omicron in our lives, including the fear of being infected and, even worse, infecting others. And finally, we light a candle for the anniversary of the January 6th insurrection and say a prayer for our country. With each candle lit, may each one of us know that we are held in the care and love of our community. Joy, beauty, and blessing are all around us, beloved. I lift up our veterinarian that declared our fur baby Breddy doesn't need his toe amputated. Please snap your fingers and smile if you're celebrating birthdays, anniversaries, new beginning, good endings, or healing. We celebrate you. We celebrate that we're connected in this virtual space, and we're grateful for our loving connection, dear Beacon family. We do not take this sacred time and space for granted because we are blessed to have each other. We celebrate that when one of us is hurting or grieving or shouting with glee, we are never alone because we have each other to share it with. Beloved, for these gifts and so much more that goes unnamed, we give thanks. Thank you.
Here comes the sun, doo-doo-doo. Here comes the sun, and I say it's alright. Little darling, it's been a long, cold, lonely winter. Little darling, it seems like years since it's been here. Here comes the sun, doo-doo-doo. Here comes the sun, and I say it's alright. Little darling, the smiles returning to their faces. Little darling, it feels like years since it's been here. Here comes the sun, doo-doo-doo. Here comes the sun, and I say it's alright. Sun, 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 here it comes. 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 Little darling, I feel that ice is slowly melting. Little darling, it seems like years since it's been clear. Here comes the sun, doo-doo-doo. Here comes the sun, I say it's alright. It's alright.
The Beatles serenade us with their song, a song of faith. Here comes the sun. It's hard to remember on long, cold, lonely winter nights that the sun and light and warmth are returning. It's hard to believe in a week of disruption, insurrection, and loss of bright stars that it's all right. Is it all right, we wonder? Can anything ever be all right again? Yet they serenade us. Here comes the sun, inviting us to believe. And we are people of faith, even when we have more questions than answers. Yes, we are people who center liberation, even when we struggle to embody liberation. We are people who choose love, even when our acts of love unintentionally harm people we love. Here in our times of darkness, there is wisdom, just as there is wisdom in the light. So return now to your breath with me, beloved. Close your eyes. Feel your heart beating. Relax your body. Offer yourself in this time of centering the gift of compassion. Breathing in, I am aware of my strong emotions. Breathing out, I extend love to my being. Then offer the gift of compassion to another. Maybe it is someone who needs love right now. Maybe it is someone who you have been in conflict this week. Maybe it is somebody you don't even know. Offer them the gift of compassion. Breathing in, I am aware of your strong emotions. Breathing out, I extend love to your being. Now offer the gift of compassion to one another, to our relationship. Breathing in, I am aware of our strong emotions. Breathing out, I extend love to our relationship, to our connection. I invite you to open your eyes, breathing in deeply again. Can you, beloved, experience now the ice of your heart slowly melting? Can you experience now the smile returning to your face? There is wisdom here, beloved, in the darkness. And I say, it's all right. Amen.
Hi, I'm Marcy, and I guess I would say I'm on a bit of a path towards being able to take action to dismantle racism. Maybe I should have called it a journey, because I've been at this for a couple of years, and yet I still feel I have so much more to learn and more progress to make. For me, it really began with a great deal of introspection, of knowing what's in my heart, to raising my own awareness, and frankly, to replacing my own ignorance with facts and knowledge. And I guess for me, I would call this a spiritual journey, because it's all about my leaning into our belief and love in the inherent worth and dignity of every human being. And also being able to know how and when to take action to dismantle racism, whether that's in my life, in my community, here at Beacon, or in the greater world. And for all of this, I'd like to thank Beacon, and I'd like to thank you, because Beacon, I believe, was really the catalyst that allowed me to open my heart and believe that we could do better in this area. And Beacon's also provided the community, and many of you who have provided love and support and encouragement and enablement, and that's really important. But along with that love, my beloved community also provided a great deal of challenge that made me rethink some of my assumptions, to consider what's in my heart, and in many ways to change my mind, and I'm equally as thankful for that. Beacon's also been able to make me aware of resources that have been invaluable, including the dialogue circles that are sponsored in part by the Summit Interfaith Council. I've participated in that 3 times, and I think I may be coming back for more. And just last month, I participated in a workshop called Jubilee 3, which is offered by 3 Black senior UUs, the same folks that are behind part of the grassroots effort to have congregations sign on to the 8th principle, which of course we did last year. And that principle, by the way, commits us to taking action, and I think that's a wonderful thing. With that, as we move into our time of giving, I'd like to ask you, what are you thankful to Beacon for? And please give generously. Thank you for that, and thanks for listening to my story.
It was fall at Harvard when it seems to be its most indomitable. It feels like every movie I've ever seen about an Ivy League school takes place in the autumn. I was in my first semester of seminary. And sometimes, institutions like Harvard can make some people feel even bigger and empowered. And at other times, places like Harvard can make some of us feel even smaller. I had spent the senior year in high school couch surfing, and the entirety of college working at least 2, if not 3, jobs to get through. I'd never been outside of upstate New York, and so living in Boston and going to Harvard felt like an entirely different world. There I was on my first day, feeling very small. In all my 5'2" glory, sitting in one of those hallowed hallways where I was sure Emerson had walked down. I was so nervous that day waiting to meet my advisor, the reason that I had come to Harvard, that I was holding my paper with my course selections and sweating so profusely that the paper was starting to wilt. It was just then that it felt like I was going to explode as a bundle of nerves when someone came out into the hallway and said, "Professor's running just a little bit late. She'll be here shortly." I don't think I could even utter a word. I was so nervous. Sure enough, a few minutes later, the professor arrived with apologies for having been running late. "Oh, no worries," I said. Your secretary told me." It was then that I noticed the student who'd been sitting across from me in the hallway wince, like physically pull their body in. And it was then that my advisor looked at me with somewhat of a surprised face. "Secretary? We don't use that word anymore. It's administrative assistant." My mom's a secretary. She was a secretary, is a secretary. I don't think she thinks it's offensive. I mean administrative assistant. It was as if my mouth had fallen off of my face and was tumbling down that hallowed hallway in front of me. I couldn't stop. I don't remember much of the rest of the conversation that day, to be honest, beloved. I do remember the sensation of feeling that I had single-handedly, in one swoop, ruined the relationship with the most important person at Harvard, and by consequence, my entire life. Now, all these years later, we can laugh about that and realize how absurd my conclusions were. And yet, this wouldn't be the last time that I said something that was harmful. In fact, this is a relatively small example that I use because it's unlikely to cause more harm in the retelling. There were worse situations where I practically shrieked, "I didn't mean it." As the famous phrase goes, the path to hell is paved with good intentions. I can recall times like when I companioned people at an abortion clinic that there was clear intent to cause me harm. Other times when I was out in public speaking for marriage equality or transgender rights and equality, that certainly it was clear people intended to harm me. But most of the time, when harmful things have been said to me because of some of my identities as a woman, for example, or lesbian, or some combination of different qualities I have, most of the time, it's not been intentional. Accountability, or in other terms, faithfulness, is a core practice of covenant. Accountability for the impact of our actions is sacred work. But why is it so hard for so many of us, including myself? Why is it so hard to close the gap between where we are and where we aspire to be? Why do we get stuck? I know walking into Harvard that day, I carried a large suitcase of shame with me from what I'd been told, from what I've absorbed and believed for so many years. I suspected that I was one twist or turn away from being exposed as an imposter, exposed as one not smart enough, not loving enough, not good enough. And so how could I open my heart with concern for widening my circle of concern, for widening my compassion for others when I had such self-loathing? If we are to be beacons of what Reverend Dr. Jackie Lewis calls fierce love, the love is a devotion, as in committed emotion, not just an affection, we must begin with an ethic of love that begins with self-love, of believing in our enoughness. When our kids were about 4 years old, the twins, my partner, Anne Marie, and I went to upstate New York, where I grew up, to spend a weekend in a fishing camp where I spent most of my summers. Over 100 years old, this one-room camp was an intimate experience for anyone staying there. The bathroom walls didn't even make it up to the ceiling, and the living room was both a dining room and a bedroom. The twins had a wonderful time. Having just been 4 years old, they completed their swim classes, and they were excited to be out in the water. My father decided to take them out on the canoe, an activity that I had done hundreds, if not thousands of times as a kid. There they were, with their little life vests lowered into the canoe just about 10 feet offshore, when Kirk, the ever-curious one, was leaning over the boat trying to understand how the paddles were working and fell in the water. Immediately, he started flailing in the water, gulping down big swallows. Anne-Marie started running down toward the dock, but I stood at the shore and shouted out to him, "Stand up!" Because I knew where he was, the water could be no more than 6 inches deep at most. Anne-Marie jumped in the water because he kept flailing, panicked so he couldn't hear what I was saying, and she picked him up by his shirt and stood him up as he coughed out the water. Beloved, when we are carrying around pain and shame, and a beloved tells us of our impact, it's like flailing in 6 inches of water. We don't know at that moment that we know how to swim, and our panic takes over in old fear that so many of us learned as children, that we aren't good enough and everyone's gonna know. When we are carrying around shame and pain and a beloved harms us with their words or their actions, it's like being thrown in that water and everyone watching and not helping, not stopping the drowning. When we move toward beloved community, we practice radical self-love as our pre-work to being human together. In the words of Archbishop Desmond Tutu, "I am because we are." You know, Archbishop Tutu tells this story that he recalls after apartheid had ended in South Africa. The first time that he got on a plane and saw that there were 2 black pilots. Because in South Africa during apartheid, a black person was not permitted to get a pilot's license. Archbishop Tutu says that he had 2 almost simultaneous reactions. The first was, "Yippee, this is amazing," he said. 2 black pilots flying our plane. He erupted in a smile that quickly diminished as he thought, are they capable of flying this plane? He said he recognized in that moment his own deep woundedness by this system of oppression, that he would question whether these 2 black pilots could fly the plane. Accountability absolutely involves structural change. And it is also deeply of the heart processing, too, the long healing of woundedness. Self-love is key, it's foundational, for it allows us to show up and to recall that the water is 6 inches deep. We can recall that we are not the sum of the worst thing we've ever done, nor the sum of the story of white supremacy. We are beloved. From this place, we can rise in waters together and widen the circle of concern, to quote the recent denominational by our Unitarian Universalist Association commission and report. In the words of Reverend Dr. Sharon Welch in her work, Communities of Resistance and Solidarity, liberation theologians are not concerned with the essence of human being per se, but with the creation or maintenance of a specific form of human existence. In our work for communities of justice and peace, it is crucial that we remember how easily structures of kinship are obliterated. That is to say, as Unitarian Universalists, we are not, in fact, trying to close the gap between where we individually are and where we aspire to be. That's a part of this work. but instead we are trying to close the gap between one another, to build beloved community, kinship. In smaller communities, that means building in processes, in meetings and gatherings, small groups, to enable the group to stop when harm is done and pain is present, to give space for the feelings, for the heart process, heart truth, to recovenant and to transform. And to admit that in each harm, we must collectively tell the truth, like the story this morning, that not all the feathers can be collected. I think of the sentencing just this last week, the sentencing of the murderers of Ahmaud Arbery, and the truth that no verdict, no sentence will bring Ahmaud Arbery back. As Amanda Gorman teaches in the poem Gated, accountability also means a remembering that transforms the future. She writes, "Anyone who has lived is an historian and an artifact, for they hold all their time within them. Reconciliation is this record we make. If we remember anything, let it be to remember. A road forward we shall have if we keep walking." Are there spaces in each community within Beacon where truth and the naming of pain can be held at any moment, where being human and holding one another is primary? In your home, in your marriage, in your neighborhood, with your close friends, are we building these spaces for heart truth? Do we punish or praise our children, our partners, our family for telling the truth and feeling with honesty? Can we be proximate to our own pain and the pain of a beloved without being threatened? Amanda Gorman reminds us once more, now in the poem entitled Back to the Past, the closest thing we get to time travel is our fears softening, our hurts unclenching, as we become more akin to kin, as we return to who we were before we actually were anything or anyone. That is when we were born unhating and unhindered, howling wetly with everything we could yet become. To travel back in time is to remember when all we knew of ourselves was love. When all we knew of ourselves was love. We were made for love, to remember. Together we can rise from the waters of our terrors. Together we can hear truths and offer more than an apology. Truly, to give, create, craft accountability. Together we are never the sum of the worst thing we've ever done. Together we are the sum of us, beloved.
We are building a new way. We are building a new way. We are building a new way, feeling stronger every day. We are building a new way. We are working to be free.
We were made for love, to remember, and so I wish you, beloved, a truth that sustains a future, a circle who hold your sacredness, a community of communities that becomes together, widens the circle of concern, opens to the heart truth, and is transformed by love. We do not extinguish now the light of our chalice, but we blow this light out into the world, acknowledging that this light can never be extinguished, for it goes with each of us. Blessed be. Amen.